Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Suzerain. So let's go ahead and hop into this. So let's, you know what, let's go ahead and do this briefing on the current economic situation in the White Room. Simon Hall, Gus Manger, and Lilius Graff were about to arrive at the White Room for our scheduled economy meeting. This was the room in the Maroon Palace where all important meetings were held. Two assistants arrived first, carrying a heavy projector. They stood waited by the door, waiting for the ministers to arrive, or to enter. From the hallway, I heard Lilius Graff's voice. She was using the patient, almost motherly tone she often took in heated arguments. Gus, do you really think that such an economically advanced area is more in need of investment than England? Lilius, my interior minister, strode in. She was clad in shades of brown and beige, the most basic of color, a bright yellow, death-nursed cross on her necklace. Gus followed close behind. Don't be an idiot, Lilius. What about the unemployment crisis the Greater Sword and Gelsland regions are going through? These areas are our economic heartland. Gus curled his hands into fists. The Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development's temper hadn't changed since his days in the Alfonso administration, but neither had his reputation for getting things done. His far-reaching network of connections was unlike any other. Simon Hall quickly stepped between the two ministers without looking at either of them. He cleared his throat. Good morning, Mr. President. What is this debate about? Just a disagreement in internal economic strategy, President Rain. Not sure if I would call it just a disagreement. Lilius, can you explain the situation? Mr. Manger proposes that we should invest in already developed regions. Meanwhile, many cities in England, like Lenkirk and Arvery, still don't have basic commodities delivered in time. Could you elaborate? Of course. The argument is simple. England is our weakest region, both in terms of economic and social support. Forgot to start my timer. We should support the city of Arvery and its respected mayor. How impartial can you really be? Simon was observing the argument. Why are you questioning her impartiality? This snake of a woman is the former mayor of Arvery, and Eric Neal is her successor. Her argument could be biased. Gus, dear, my arguments are proven by simple economic data. Our poorest and least developed region is England. The facts are clear, but it seems to me you'd rather resort to name-calling to push your agenda. The figures are being skewed in Nargis to make it look like a developed region, for example. In truth, it is the poorest region of all. Nargis, you say? Where is Nargis? Oh, right here. Okay. That sounds good. I would like to put a stop to this debate. We will discuss it all calmly and logically. Simon pulled a silk handkerchief out of his pocket and briefly wiped his glasses. Silk? Okay. Fancy schmancy over here using silk. My staff and I have comprehensively analyzed every aspect of... He was interrupted by a groan from one of the assistants by the door, both of whom were now visibly struggling to hold up the heavy projector. Oh, you can put that there. He pointed below the painting of President Sol. The assistants placed the projector next to the table and installed a white screen on the wall. Leave now. Thank you, and please leave now. The assistants left the cabinet room. I was reminded that Simon had never quite had a way with people. But his facility with numbers had made him the most sought-after economic specialist in Sordland. Simon started looking for his slides. He always carried documentation around with him. We'll wait. Lilius leaned to the table and spoke. Simon, what happened to the new police station construction in Estort? While going through his briefcase, he paused for a moment to answer. It got stalled due to a government property boundary issue. I have been meaning to look at it. I can take a look at that one. Estord needs all the security it can get. Sure, more time for me to spend on analysis. His eyes glittered when he finally found the slides he was looking for. There have been some developments about the Swordish Wren losing further value today. We have been trying to stabilize it with the central bank. The recession of 51 put enormous pressure on the economy, resulting in the collapse of the value of our currency. The entire situation was a significant cause of concern for our administration. What would you like to know about the current economic situation? Well, what is our GDP and debt situation? Our current GDP is 310 billion Swordish Wren, and the national debt is 427 billion. It's still hard to fathom that we lost nearly 150 billion in wealth. The past 3 years were rough. What is our unemployment and inflation rate? Unemployment has skyrocketed and is now at a staggering 16%, and the inflation is at a relative high of 10%. Unemployment is increasing crime and drug use. We need to get people off the streets. The inflation isn't helping our average citizen either. What is the status of the recession? The economy has been in a recession of about -6% in the past year. The average GDP has dropped from 15,454 Swordish Wren per capita to 10,359 Swordish Wren from 1951 to now. This administration's success depends on our ability to stop the recession. The sooner we can reach GDP growth, the better. I have all the information needed. Let's move on to the economic strategy. Simon scattered the paper stack in front of him in an orderly manner and took a final look at his notes before clearing his throat. As you can see, the situation is alarming, but not everything is negative. The extensive privatization program of Alfonso and key foreign direct investments left us a large budget surplus, which we can use to stabilize the crisis. The primary subject we need to settle on is what general path we will take in our term. Solonomics-based nationalization happened in the 30s, and Alfonso's privatization began during the end of the 40s. What will our administration focus on? One of our main promises was to promote a free market economy to stop the recession. To be frank, I believe it is the only way out of the recession. I still do not support it. Why promote the private sector when we have qualified state-owned enterprises? Because the lack of competition has made them inefficient. Simon nodded. Well, what are the consequences of the free market? There are not many, but one could say that we are much more likely to be influenced by the world economy. It is important to think about this subject because the upswings of the world economy will reflect good on ours too. Yes, and when the global economy crashes, we go down with it. The structural problems of Solonomics were going to lead to a recession according to the predictions of the time anyway. Either way, even if we pick one of the doctrines, we retain the option to make economic choices on a case-by-case basis. That is, however, not recommended in my point of view. The last thing we need is a chaotic economic plan. Finally, something we can both agree on. There is another important point which has a direct impact on our economy: superpowers. We might have won the election, but I am still against aligning ourselves with any superpowers. Economically speaking, we are much more closer to Arcasia than United Cantana, so a decision to align to the west makes more sense. We must be very cautious. There are schemes being devised about Sordland. We cannot give in to their wants now or in the future, otherwise our country will turn into a pawn. I want you to reconsider your promise to align with Arcasia. Let's see, don't worry, I won't let Arcasia control Sordland. Control? No, Mr. President, it's simply a partnership, and a very valuable one at that. Valuable for Arcasia, maybe, not for Sordland. That is simply untrue. When the time comes, I hope you will make the right decision, for our own good. We should attract more foreign direct investment, Mr. President. We saved the country from a full-on depression in 1952, in 1953 by signing lucrative trade deals with nations such as Rhesia, Lyspia, and Quinal. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Minister Whiskey will be in charge of informing you on those types of foreign policy decisions. We must first decide on our internal economic plan. Simon put forward a legal document outlining the possibilities with both economic doctrines listed. The cabinet members looked at me. Let's see. Well, would a free market focus bring us stronger allies? It would make Arcasia look at our country in a more positive light. They are proponents of the free market economy. The influence Arcasia has on the world economy is extensive. Our economic strategy should be based on internal reasoning, though. Okay, what's on our long-term economic schedule? Picking a construction company, trade relations, tax reform, and privatization initiatives would be some of them. Sticking to a solid planned economy strategy will be the right call. The 5-year plans were fruitful in the past. Well, clearly they weren't. They just may not have played out, had the time to play out long enough to see that they were bad ideas. Let's finish what Alfonso started with the capitalist free market reforms. His path was going to enrich Sordland. The recession was the direct result of his free market reforms. History must note that the reason for the recession was because Alfonso was betrayed by his party. That is not true. There was plenty of time for him to do it. If you can't make change happen in 2 years, then you are at fault. Let's move on to the conclusion. What are your final thoughts, Mr. President? Okay, so we can either obviously go all in on free market. So market economy doesn't require as much guidance and could help us attract foreign capital. We should look at opportunities like privatization to create financial resources, or critical institutions must remain in state control. We must be fully responsible in delivering services. Partly just from a decision that'll happen later, I do sort of lean towards the critical institutions must remain in state control. But in many ways, otherwise, feel free to privatize. But there are some things where maybe we don't do that. Few could be, and it wouldn't be negative, but either way, you make the choices. So, what will our general economic plan promote? Well, our general plan will be to promote a free market economy as we planned. And of course, you don't agree with this. Now that there is clarity on which direction we are heading, I will work on a good plan accordingly. This concludes our meeting. At our next gathering, we will talk about the upcoming infrastructure investment plan. The infrastructure report here. The recent collapse of the tourism industry in Dunkirk has led to a reduction in trade traffic and road maintenance. The road network is currently in service but is in need of substantial improvements. Ports, country roads, and bridges similarly suffer from a lack of investment. Yada yada yada. Okay, yep, sounds good. Obviously not really, but you know what I mean. Sea rig maintenance is needing to be done at the port of Lockhaven. Sounds good. Gelsord. The recession led to a reduction in rail assets, with more than a fifth of the rail network itself antiquated, being mothballed in recent years. While the main lines of the railway network are currently in service, increasing demand in goods from Gelsord to the capital is pushing the network to its limits. The rail signaling system in the region dates from the middle of the last century and is also in need of improvement. Don't worry, we'll get right on that at some point. Increasing unemployment in Morna rose to 9% in the following year. Borin, booming wine demand in Borin. Well, that's good, I guess. Sarna, promising agricultural growth. Oh, well, that sounds like a good thing to build up. Certainly, if given the opportunity. We got some stuff here on the world stage to look at. The Kingdom of Rizia congratulates us for our election victory. He praised Sordland's so-called democratic ethos. Oh, really? So-called, you say? The king anticipates a future of close cooperation and mutual respect between the two nations, regardless of the governmental differences. Yes. The Kingdom of Rizia, anchored in gold. They are a member of Grace, the Guild of Royal Allies for Commercial Exchange. This is we want to have a third, major organization beyond this game's version of NATO and the Warsaw Pact. So we have Grace. They are an international organization founded to foster economic cooperation and exchange among monarchies from various continents. They are led by the Kingdom of Rumburg. Fear God and honor the Queen. They're not friendly towards us. They have an overwhelmingly stronger military compared to us. They have a population of about 4 times ours, roughly. They are only 4th in world GDP. Which, I guess is good in some ways for us. They're not number 1. The Content and Security Pact and the Federation of Anraka signed a historic non-aggression pact for 5 years. This landmark agreement underlines the CSP's commitment to broadening its influence beyond its home continent of Katana while maintaining peaceful relations across the globe. The pact demonstrates the CSP's ongoing efforts to peacefully expand its influence across the Ankaran archipelago, marking an important turn in the complex geopolitical landscape. As the CSP strengthens its global position to counteract the capitalist influence of the ATO, this agreement signals a commitment to strategic, peaceful expansion that respects the sovereignty of nations that lie in the ocean between United Kantana and Arcasia. Now, I will say, the big thing for me is that I don't know where those guys are. I don't think I've ever been able to find them. Because it's not these guys are the Republic of Curite. And this is the Grand Duchy of Pales. And this color would indicate these are probably owned by Volgsland, these little islands out here. And this is clearly called Galmland, not, whatever those guys are called, so that I don't know where the hell, these guys are supposed to be. Oh, let's go and take a look at the news. Tourism, a beacon of hope for Sordland. That sounds wonderful. Sordland today, fueling Sordland's tomorrow. This is unfazed by recent political developments, Gassom is set to bolster Sordland's infrastructure and support its ongoing development efforts. As one of Sordland's largest corporations, Gassom's financial aid, logistical support, and equipment aid are crucial to Sordland's economic resurgence. Okay, economist. Armadine Industries, pioneering electronics. This will be important down the road for us. Freezing temperatures recorded in the city of Suzerain. Okay, this is actually one of ours. Suzerain, where is Suzerain? Oh, right over here, right along the border. Okay. Radical. Nationalist violence. A man in his 20s has been beaten with baseball bats in a paramilitary-style attack in Arvory. The man claims to have been attacked because of his ethnic background as an Agno-Sordish citizen. He was approached during a walk at the park by a group of right-wing extremists who are suspected of being regulars at the local National Front Party office. The group inflicted injuries to his legs and arms, police said. The man was brought to the hospital after making his way to a nearby property. The police service of Arvory said it was a brutal attack of which there is no justification. There is no place for attacks such as this in our society, said Eric Neal, mayor of Arvory, and called for unity and urged restraint from the populace. We'll see how well that plays out. Edward Alfonso, the once influential political figure and former president, has publicly severed ties with the influential Lothberger group. Frustrated by the group's direction, Alfonso, the current chair of GASOM, is determined to steer his own path. Interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and briefing on the current political situation. Peter Vectern arrived a couple of minutes early and sat across from me. He was struggling to hold back his smile. We did it, Anton. We won. Finally, all those years with our noses to the grindstone paid off. Peter's eyes sparkled. The strain of the past months had been a damper on his usual rakish charm. But today he was looking and acting more like his old self. He loosened his tie and undid the bottom two buttons of his shirt. Or excuse me, the top two buttons of his shirt. Enjoying the new secretary I picked out for you. Thought you'd appreciate her gorgeous set of talents. It's a shame the rest of your staff aren't as easy on the eyes. He gestured to the slight pouch that protruded over his waistband. But hey, back in university, did you ever imagine we would be sitting here in the Maroon Palace? We have to celebrate this great victory. Yes, let's celebrate then. I got my hands on something special for us. An Erlori Maroon 30-year-old. I opened the expensive bottle of whiskey and poured it in the 2 glasses I prepared. The exquisite smell filled the room immediately. The 1924, that was my freshman year, also the year after the revolution. Very difficult times, to be honest, but this smells like heaven. The future awaits, Peter. I raised my glass and toasted with Peter before smelling the whiskey and taking a sip. The sweet vanilla tone combined with an oaky taste developed into a lingering smokiness. Peter really seemed to be enjoying himself. What a taste. This is how we should start all meetings, Anton. We wouldn't get much done. Remember the last administration? Yeah, but we are different. All they did was enjoy the privilege. I hope it won't be the case for my cabinet. He suddenly looked a bit anxious on his chair. I assure you it won't. We will not make the same mistakes. I sure do hope so. The door swung open and Lucien Galald, my chief strategist, walked in. He was a compact man with sharp bird-like features. After briefly surveying the room from wall to wall, he sat down, poured a glass of water, and opened his briefcase in a series of quick, graceful movements. Gentlemen. The tall case clock in the room struck 3 o'clock. Damn, you are exactly on time. Hello, Peter. Lucien then turned towards me. He very slightly bowed his head. Glad to see you, Lucien. It is a privilege to be here, sir. Lucien spoke in soft, clipped tones that immediately drew your attention towards what he had to say. Peter and I waited for him to proceed. Let's start by evaluating our current situation. The majority of the Swordish people demand a change. They are more concerned about the economy than the constitution, but they blame the system for their problems. People are losing their trust in our democracy. Why do you think radicals like Bernard Circas are becoming more popular? Everyone's expecting us to bring the change the last government did not. This guy is a Swordish poet, novelist, short story writer, and communist politician. Okay. He's acclaimed for his lyrical flow and was regarded to be the leader of the Swordish avant-garde. His early writings were heavily influenced by the social, cultural, and economic problems of his home city of Deir. His work earned him the description of a romantic communist. He joined the Red Youth during the Swordish Civil War. He fled Sordland after the war was over, surviving the purge of Tarkin's soul. He moved to United Contana and studied sociology at the Communist University of Kiao. There, he was influenced by the artistic experiments of Contanan poets who advocated futurism as well as the ideological vision of Malyanev. Many of his works are regarded as the greatest achievements of the Swordish literature and earned him many awards abroad. Because of his political views, his works have been banned in Sordland since 1930. In 1950, Bernard returned to Sordland following the departure of Tarkin's soul. He organized strikes against Swordish government's failure to include amnesty laws and started to become a popular figure in Swordish politics. He ran as an independent in the 1953 general election and became the first communist to be elected to the Grand National Assembly of Sordland. Franz Richter, the leader of the Reformists, believes that true change can only be accomplished by transferring some of our powers to the Assembly. I'll move into the details of their demands shortly. This is the dude who's in charge of the PFJP. He will have some interesting events later on. Let's see. Well, I agree with the Reformists. Our responsibility is to democratize our broken system. Although, we need to listen to the people if we want to serve this country. That's exactly what we campaigned for, a true change that will move the country forward. We will need many allies against the old guard and the government. Mr. Richter managed to persuade many members of Assembly to give their support for drafting a new constitution. Reformist politicians are quickly increasing in number. While the reformist wing inside our party is still a minority, they could have a tripartisan majority in the Assembly, especially if they unite under Franz Richter. Let's see. The USP reformists aren't wrong to agree that we need change, but we should be in charge. We can't let the PFJP leadership take the spotlight on this. The reformist demands are clear. They want to limit the president's veto powers, ensure that the Supreme Court is independent, and take away the court's right to vote on constitutional amendments. Let's see. I support the reformists. We need a proper balance of power in this country. I agree. We can't ignore the winds of change, after all. The old guard will do its best to preserve the Constitution. Chief Justice Hawker and his allied judges have a great influence over the Supreme Court, which will be tough to break. The court also has the final say over constitutional legislation. Without their approval, we cannot even change it. Let's see. We need a comprehensive bill to balance the power structure more fairly. I agree. The old guard won't like this, though. A comprehensive reform that would make the reformists happy would mean maintaining a balance between all branches of government, which means removing your absolute veto as well. The reformists demand that all loopholes in the Constitution are closed. Well, it looks like we have many challenges ahead. We can't figure it out. We can figure it out. Our party still holds 130 out of 250 seats in the Assembly. we've got the power. However, to reform the Constitution, we must receive a 2/3 majority in the Grand National Assembly, which is 166 votes, and a simple majority in the Supreme Court that equates to 6 votes. After we have settled on how to proceed, we will need to talk with our party figures. Our first goal must be to get the 150 signatures needed to start the process. Following the green light from the USP, we will reach out to the other party leaders to see if they could back our draft. The last step is to convince the justices of the court. The entire process will take a long time, but we must start working with a reform committee to evaluate all possibilities for a new constitution as soon as possible. Let's see. Well, that seems to go completely against everything we were just saying. We will write a more democratic constitution with the reformists. That's what we've been preparing for internally. Don't forget that promise is what got us elected. The key thing here will be strengthening the power of the assembly, which we already lead with a majority. Yes, the divisions of power need to be rebalanced for a better Sordland. According to the initial draft we made with the reformists, there are 2 changes to the Constitution that are not open for their discussion. First, the Supreme Court will no longer vote on constitutional amendments. That sounds fine. Second, the President's absolute veto will be taken away. This can be replaced with a limited veto system by fixing the current loopholes. Those sound fine to me. Yes, sir. We will form a reform committee together with all parties and start reaching out to all the stakeholders in the assembly and the court for a new constitution. By later in the year, we should have an idea of the reform contents and what the other parties want. Another important point, we must be aware of the Lotharberg Group. The oligarchs convene under the organization to influence economic policies. Conrad led it for a long time before falling ill. The new leader is Mr. Walter Tusk. According to reports, some members of the National Business Council are in their pockets. Tusk and the group will surely try to bribe us in exchange for special economic protections. Let's see. I will enter a dialogue with them eventually. We need to be diplomatic. A wise approach. It's good to understand and see if we can reach a middle ground. As far as I know, Marcel Caranti has some strong ties to this group. His influence could definitely be an asset for us, but I'm sure he'll want something in return. Let's see. I'm aware of Mr. Caranti's wide network. That could come in handy. We just need to be careful with him. He looks like the lesser evil, but it could very quickly turn out to be the other way around. We need to tread carefully on all sides with all power players to survive our term. I need to underline the seriousness of the situation. The military and the general staff are a powerful element in the state, and as history tells us, a dangerous one too. We do have some room to make structural changes, but by reducing their budget, for example, but it is quite limited. Also, reducing their budget is probably a terrible idea, as we will see later on. Let's see. With the Rumberg threat on the horizon, we can't reduce our defense capability and anger our general staff. I would advise the same. The budget should be maintained, and we should refrain from confronting the military too directly. Defense Minister Isof Lancia is more loyal to us compared to General Kruger, in fact, or a fact that obviously can change with our actions. Either way, I see a potential rift between the two since they are clearly of different minds. So, Iosef Lancia is the bald, heavyset guy. He's been a member of the United Sordland Party since its formation in 1929. He was captain during the Swordish Civil War. He gained nationwide fame after his heroism and accomplishments as major during the Wayland Civil War, which also earned him the highest military order. He became a popular figure after the wars and still is well respected among the nationalists. He is credited for several major military operations and known to be an influential figure in the Swordish armed forces. Yada yada yada. Well, General Kruger here is our... his uniform looks like it's straight out of the Soviet Union. Almost, and maybe that's just me. But yeah, he's, you know... Excuse me. He supported General Luderan's military coup, but later turned against him after Luderan's mass executions in 1928. He was among the group of officers who organized under Colonel Saul in the Swordish Civil War. He was appointed Brigadier General in 1929 and a member of the Swordish General Staff. He became famed for his military victory in 1933 along the Wayland border, where his smaller brigade destroyed an entire rebel army in the Battle of Suzerain. He was later awarded with the White Star by Tarkin Sol, the highest medal that can be bestowed upon an individual by the Swordish Armed Forces. So there we go. If we act strongly against the military, both of those guys will unite against us. I agree with Lucian, and we need to tread carefully here. Well then, gentlemen, precisely 30 minutes. This concludes our political briefing for today. Our next meeting will be about our our media strategy. Talk to you soon, sir. I will keep in touch. See you both at the next meeting. Lucian and Peter bid their farewells and left. A mysterious amount of smoke was rising far away on the horizon. Oh. Collection item, we got a whiskey bottle. And Lordy Maroon, 30 years aged, a bottle of pure harmony. Each sip unfolds layers of complex flavors, transporting one of the serene highlands of Sordland. You know, I think it's close enough. We're gonna go ahead and I think end this part here. I will see you all next time, where we will go through all of these other little clickies, and then continue on and do our meeting for the media strategy. But until then, goodbye and farewell. Do want to go ahead and obviously say, I don't say it very often, but if you do find yourself enjoying the content, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. YouTube, I do have it set up so that you can support the channel via YouTube directly. That can, you know, helps the channel out. You do get early access to videos because when I do post them, I do set them up so that they are available for supporters with early access before that they would actually go public for everybody else rather. So if you do support the channel, you do get early access to videos. I also will add your name to the credits at the end of videos as well. But until then, till the next video, goodbye and farewell.